All right. We are live on the interwebs. Hello, interwebs. Let's share our screen. So, you guys have heard, we are covering Spring today. So, have you heard of Spring yet? Yeah? From me. Yes. Yes. This Spring is kind of one of the biggest things in the class. Spring is a very popular web application development framework. Chances are, if you do Java development, it's going to be Java web development. And chances are, if you're doing Java web development, you'll be using Spring. Okay? So what we'll be studying is something called Spring Boot. Spring Boot was a project that the Spring maintainers created to let you get started with the Spring application really quickly without having to have like tons of configuration files. Because if there's one thing that plagued Spring, is it was that you had to have like a lot of like XML files everywhere, and it was hard to get started, and you needed to know a lot before you could even begin. So they created Spring Boot so that people could just like get up and running with a Spring project, pre-configured libraries there for you. And not only that, they made this thing called the Spring Initializer, which we'll be using to initialize a Spring Boot project. Okay? So, classwork. First thing we're going to do is say hello Spring. Right? This is our first Spring application. If you guys want to follow along, there's a couple things we should be doing. So the first thing we're going to do is go to this Spring Initializer website. I'm not sharing my screen on the AirPlay, so it should do that. Definitely need a haircut today. It's going to happen. All right, so if you are looking in on the lesson and you click this link, you should see this page, the Spring Initializer page. So this page allows you to specify the kinds of stuff that you're going to need in your project and then generate a pre-configured Spring Boot project file based off of that. It's really cool. It's super awesome. It doesn't seem like we have enough bandwidth to support at Google.
So this thing can add
dependencies. So you specify your dependencies here on the website, and you click the checkboxes, and it just gives you all the things you need. You just import it into IntelliJ, and you have a project. Okay, it's pretty sweet. So we're going to choose Gradle project. We're going to try and use Gradle more than Maven with Spring because Gradle is kind of a more progressive, like later, newest, trendiest thing to use. So yeah, keep in mind that this gets a lot of people is to make sure, like if you're doing the homework, for instance, you always know to select Gradle instead of Maven. Because if you download a Maven project and you try to import it as a Gradle project, it's going to be strange. That has tripped up people in the past, including me, right? So basically, the gist of it is if you expect a Gradle project and you see a pom.xml file in the root of your project, then you know something's up because the pom is a Maven thing, right? So we'll select Gradle. We're going to choose the group as common at the iron yard, and the artifact is hello spring. We're going to click on switch to full version here. Right, so that's a pretty cool thing. So the description is the Hello World Spring project. You can make that whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to be that. So we're specifying the Java version here and the language. So those language derivatives of Java called Kotlin and Groovy. There's also one called Clojure, which we'll be looking at later in the class. But right now we're looking at Java. And then down here are all the optional dependencies that come with Spring Boot, things that you can add. And we'll be looking at a few of these, not all of them, but a few of them in class in the next couple weeks. So the first ones we want to look at are the web, mustache, and DevTools options. So we have web. So it says full stack web development with Tomcat and Spring MVC. There's that. And then mustache. So you see here's various templating engines. There's mustache here. And then DevTools. Then Spring Boot development tools here. Okay. So once you select those three checkboxes, you can see that they show up here like as like tags here. There's a selected dependencies area. And you click generate project. And it generates a Hello Spring zip file for you. So let me delete a previous one that I have here. Sorry. There. Okay, so I'm going to open that up. And hello spring.zip. It's going to automatically unarchive it. I'm going to move this to my code directory. So it exists here in Hello Spring. All right. We downloaded and unzipped the project. Again, this is what it should really look like when you have selected Web, DevTools, and Mustache. So now that we've downloaded our Gradle project, we need to import it into IntelliJ. So let's go ahead and take care of that. If you already have a project open, you can go new from existing sources and go to where you stored it. So I stored it in Hello Spring. And we're going to say that this is a Gradle project. So import project from external model, select Gradle. I like to use auto import because it just makes my life a lot easier. So we'll just stick with that. And then it's going to build the project based off of the build.gradle file. So the reason why this is taking a while is because when IntelliJ imports a Gradle project, it has to go and fetch all the dependencies of said project and pull them down. So the dependencies of this one are Spring Boot, Spring Boot Web, DevTools, and Mustache, right? So when we have a project loaded up, we can see in our external libraries list, we have all the stuff. These are all the dependencies of Spring and all the different stuff, right? Okay. So there's a note here that says future Spring projects of the same version should import much more quickly. The reason why that is because Gradle uses Maven under the covers, right? And so how Maven works is that if it retrieves a dependency from a remote server somewhere, it caches that dependency in a hidden directory on your file system. So the next time it tries to get it, it'll find it on your computer instead, and you'll have to download it over and over again. So it won't take forever every time. It's just the first time might be a little slow. All right. Okay. So once the project is ready, we want to start by creating a simple get route that displays information about a person, right? So remember how we did this before in Spring, is we had that before in Spark. We had the spark.get method call, and we gave it a path, and then we had that Lambda expression, and then we would render the model and view object. Remember all that? Okay. So keep that in mind. That was the pattern that Spark followed. We're going to create a new pattern for Spring. It has a slightly different approach to how things should be rendered. And it's actually really cool. So let's keep in mind like what exactly is going on here. So we'll create inside our templates folder, inside resources, we'll create a person.html. We open up here, source main resources templates, new HTML, was it home? Person. Really? Might be because everyone's doing it. Mine finished pretty quickly. Like it took maybe like a minute or two. I hate it when I do that. The worst, let's see. The worst is when you try to paste and you copy. Have you ever done that? Because not only did you not achieve your goal, you actually went backwards one step. So remember in Mustache, this is how you would render the fields of a person. So you pass in a person through the model, and then it renders that person's name, their city, and their age, right? So that's the Mustache language. We did that before with Spark. Keep in mind, we're using the same exact thing that we used then. So that's the power of like having these things be totally separate. Because Mustache is not a Spark thing, it's just a thing that can be used by both Spark and Spring. And even in JavaScript, actually. So, where we have our source is source main Java com the iron yard. We're going to make a class called hello spring controller.java. So let's just copy this right here. The source com the iron yard. Hello spring controller. We'll go ahead and import all the stuff from Spring that we need. All right. So we still have a missing dude here. It's because we don't have a person yet. Let's make our person class. I want to go ahead and do that right now. Let's do this right now. So I think this is as good a time as any, as we're going to be doing it shortly anyway. I'm going to create a new package here. I'm going to put my person class in here. So keep in mind that since this is a different package, then I had to import that class. So I'm going to use server here. And just for now, I'm going to just paste these guys in there.
We also need to do this.
You don't have to. I'm just showing you guys how you can organize your code, right? So inside this com.theiRonyard.server package, I put the Hello Spring application and the Hello Spring controller. These are the things that are responsible for defining what the server is. In this model, so far we have a person as our model. And so we're storing them in the models package. So this is the very beginning of like another discussion we're going to have, which is how to architect your Java projects. So I've mentioned this before, it's like levels of understanding, right? The first level being like get a grasp on the language, right? And the second level is solve basic problems. And here's like another level, which is architect your applications so that they make sense, right? And then one of the first steps into that level of problem solving is just separating them into packages that are related, right? So if we had more than one model, we put the class here in our models package. And if we had more stuff to put in to add to our server, we'd put it here in the server, okay? So don't be intimidated by that. You can kind of see that it's a little strange, but it's just a way. It's just a way of separating your code out.
So like in your controller, when you take stuff from another package, you have to import it, right?
Yes.
So yours should say like pioneer.models.person.
Yep, that's right there. So just like you imported all this other stuff, since it existed in different packages, you have to import your person class from the models. You just as easily do this, and that would import all of the models from your your model package, which we know right now is just person, but if we add another one, we don't have to change this. Okay? Yeah. I think that back in the day, because the way that imports used to work, they used to be called includes, and they were kind of part of the C compiler. And what that would literally do is go retrieve that file, and then at compile time, add that whole file to your file, right? So a lot of people just they frowned highly upon having, like, including more than you were actually using. Like, if basically the general rule of thumb is try your best not to include things that you don't use, right? So like if there's a chance that if I do this asterisk, that there's going to be a bunch in that package that I'm never going to touch, right? But I think realistically, from like a performance standpoint or like even a project size standpoint, it won't make a difference because it all gets optimized out in the compiler anyway. But it's kind of a pattern that has persisted throughout the years. Is try to just include the things that you need and nothing else, right? It's more of a readability thing than anything else. Okay, so you'll notice that we have a couple of annotations at play here. The first of which is controller. So up the top it says controller on top of the Hello Spring controller class. This specifies that this class is a controller. A controller is an MVC term. We've hinted at MVC before. We're going to be getting a little bit more into it now. MVC stands for Model View Controller, right? And again, we've covered this to some extent previously. But basically, Model View Controller is a method of architecting your web applications. And so it's split into 3 logical components. The first one being the model, second one being the view, the third one being the controller. So the controller, classically, is what makes the decision about what to render, right? The controller's job is to receive the requests and then call any services to get your data back. That data is in the form of a model. In this case, this is a person model. And then you pass that data into your view, okay? So that's the V part. So that's the M, the V, and the C. The C is what ties all those things together and actually does the job of responding to a request.
Is that the mustache?
The V, the view, the template, is in Mustache. But the controller is just straight up Java, right? So the Spring Framework, when it boots up, it's actually going to look at all classes that have this annotation and look at their request mappings. So that's what we see here, this person method. This person, the method name is really irrelevant. But basically, you'll see there up on top, it has that request mapping annotation. It specifies a path and it specifies a method. If you recall back to our Spring days, when we called spark.get and we called spark.post to set up those routes, we were generating what was called the route table, right? This is the same thing. In Spring, you make the route table with this request mapping annotation. So whenever a request comes in at /person and that request is a get method, it's going to run this method right here. All right. And here's the cool part about Spring. These parameters, Spring is going to get these parameters from the request. Okay, so name, city, and age are going to be query string parameters. So remember in Spark we had to go request.queryparams name or something like that. In Spring, these things are injected into your method, right? And not just that, the things that are injected into your method don't have to be like query string inputs. They don't have to be anything. So like, for instance, this first guy, model, is not something that you pass in through the command line. It's not something you pass in through a URL. It's not anything you pass in through the form. You say you need access to a model, and then Spring will look at the method and be like, oh, he needs a model. Let's give him one, right? We'll look at how to use the model in a sec, but if you needed to use session, for instance, in Spark, it would be give me the current request.session. In Spring, it's and then yeah, so since it sees that your method requires that as a parameter, it's going to inject an object with that type into that method.
Does it assign the object to the session or the?
Yeah. Yep. It gives us the current session. Yeah. So you don't have to worry about invoking it. You don't have to worry about where it came from. It just populates it. Now this is a pattern. This is actually pretty advanced, actually. It's a pattern called dependency injection. Okay, so this is a pattern where, like, instead of this method creating a session object itself, it says, I need to do my job, I need this object to be given to me. And the Spring framework is like, okay, I noticed you need this object, we're going to give it to you, and it gives it to you. What's up, Luke?
Hello, like 15 minutes or so?
I'm sorry?
We'll break it for hello in 15 minutes or so.
Sure. I couldn't open up that PDF because I was in my personal Gmail account, but
we can just do what you said. Let's just like do the cards.
Do the note cards? Did you get hot chocolate? That's awesome. Actually, dude, can we this lesson shouldn't take like a super long time. Can we like maybe wait until like 11:15 or 30 maybe?
Yeah, I'll just whatever.
Okay, cool. Rock on.
Cool.
Okay, so zooming forward here. So that's pretty awesome, right? This is actually a pretty deep subject in programming, and if you master it now, it'll be like people like, you know dependency injection, and you'd be like, yeah, duh, right? They'll hire you on the spot. They'll be like, how much money do you want? Do you want all the money? And you'd be like, yes, give me all the money. And they'll be like, okay, here's all the money. All right. So like if a junior programmer came to me looking for a job, and I was like, so what do you know about dependency injection? And they were able to tell me what it was, I'd be like, holy crap. Yes, you immediately work now. Okay. Okay.
So just curious.
Yeah.
Is dependency injection like something that only Spring has and for Spark, and is that why a lot of people Spring Spark?
Spring had its roots in dependency injection. So Spring supports dependency injection first, right? And I think that it's not so much that that's the only reason why people choose Spring over Spark, but Spring is a very mature web application framework. It has like there's Spring plugins for basically anything you want to be able to do. Spark is a very, yeah, like high level stuff you're going to be doing with Spring. Spark is kind of like a prototype framework. Like if you want to build something really quickly and get it off the ground and not have to worry about like you don't need like things like integration with cloud services, or you don't need all tons of options for databases. You just want to use a random database. You just want to get stuff working for like maybe a proof of concept. You would use something like Spark, right? If you wanted to build like a serious, like Lexmark.com style website, I use Lexmark as an example because one of our previous companies built that website using, it was actually CMS, but that's beside the point. If you wanted to build like a really complicated website, you would use something like Spring. Cool? Awesome. So first of all, let's check this out. So we have a new person model here. So remember we had our hash map before that we passed in to our model and view objects in Spark. In this case, this model object is automatically going to be passed into our template. It's automatically going to be exposed to our template. So this model object has a method called add attribute, where you can add an attribute with like an object with a specific name, just like the hash map. We didn't have to do the job of passing the model in. It just is available to your template. And so finally, we return person. Now, the Spring framework will see that the method returns a string and assume that that string is the name of a template. So it's going to look for a template called person.html in your resources templates folder. And so since we created that, we're all good, right? So source main, resources, templates, person.html, right? So it's going to find that. And then since we use that model attribute, we can pass that directly into here. And so person is going to be found, and then you have that, and that, okay? So let's go ahead and run it, all right? So we can run it just like normal. We can open up the server, and this Hello Spring application actually has our main method. Just run that. And it's actually pretty crazy. It's got all this ASCII art, and it shows you all the stuff that it's doing. And it does a lot of stuff. So now it's up and running by default on port 8080. So this is a generic error page, so get used to this because you'll see it a lot. But this is a 404. So the reason why this is happening is because our request mapping was not to the home page, it was to /person. So check this out. So this is a different error. This is a 500 error. So optional int parameter age is present but cannot be translated into a null value due to being declared as a primitive type, considering declaring it as an object wrapper for the corresponding primitive type. Yeah, that's 100% accurate. And I was expecting to have to explain that to you, but
We can put it in, we have to do that on the last assignment.
make an optional.
The ID we had to make as integer because of it was displayed as null and it was parsed in by the
That may have been an error that you experienced when trying to finish the project. Did I? Oh, nice. Oh, cool. I mean, of this, obviously, duh. All right, so let's see. All right, so we have a problem here where we are passing null values into our person constructor. So this is something different. But basically, we got to the point where we were making a new person object. And then we got into here, we were passing null, null, and null into this. And then our constructor was saying, this dot name is null, and it wasn't working out very well. Okay. So basically, these are required by our constructor here. Let's go ahead and type in name, city, and age just for giggles. So name is Charlotte and Ben, and city equals Charlotte, and age equals 29. I put like this in here. It says we can't map ASDF to an integer, so we have a problem, right? So once we have the proper parameters through our query string values, then we render the template, right? Alrighty. All right, so it says generate getters and setters for the class also. So let's go ahead and do that so we don't forget about it. Let's make these private, actually, private, and then generate getters and setters for all this stuff. All right, let's make sure we don't break anything. We didn't, that's good. All right, so now let's talk about JSON. Check this out. This is called, what is this? This is Hello Spring JSON Controller. Hello Spring JSON Controller. And the name is not super important. We didn't have to call it JSON Controller or anything like that. Right. But we did because it makes a lot of sense to do so. So check it out. This is the same thing for the most part, except instead of saying just controller, we specified REST controller. Okay. So this basically denotes that this Hello Spring JSON controller that it annotates is going to have a job of returning JSON back to the client, or interacting with JSON rather. It says, if you look at the documentation, it says a convenience annotation that itself is annotated with controller. So all REST controllers are controllers, right? So the REST controller is processed if an appropriate is pairs configured, such as the request. Okay, this doesn't give us a whole lot of useful information, but basically, if you make a RESTful endpoint, it's going to be a REST controller, right? So we have the same request mapping annotation here. The request that we're mapping is /person.json, and then the method is request method.get, right? Same as before. When we make a get request to person.json, we're going to do this. So check this out. This is a method that returns a person. It's called JSON home. Again, this naming is irrelevant. It takes in 3 parameters, name, city, and age, and returns a new person object. So what do you expect to see when you hit person.json?
Should be the Spring Boot. Once you enter the values.
Sorry?
Would it look the same as the once you entered in the values? And so
Person
But how is it going to be displayed in the browser?
in JSON.
In JSON. But isn't JSON like a string? Like don't we normally have to convert objects to strings in order to render them back to the client? Right? The answer is with Spark, yes. But with Spring, you could just say, this is a RESTful endpoint that returns JSON. Here's the object that I want to return back to the client. And it's like, okay, I'll convert that to JSON for you. And you don't have to worry about the conversion to JSON or anything like that.
Spring is awesome.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys are coming to this realization. I actually really like Spark just for its simplicity. It's like a scalpel, whereas Spring is like a Swiss Army knife, right?
So that converted to JSON is that
Yeah. Yep.
we had to do so many steps. I feel like, or
I mean, it was like 2 steps. It was like
complicated.
it was like include a library and use the library to serialize your
Well, I
object.
didn't get it. So.
So we restarted our web server. If we go to person.json instead of /person, what we see is, yes, indeed, we have a JSON object staring us in the face. It is the same as these values here. So actually, I live in Mooresville. I'll update that to that, my age. Say that I'm turning 30 this year, so it'll be Oh, she's not 7, she's 5, you idiot. And she's starting kindergarten today. Crazy. All right, so note that we're using the REST controller this time instead of controller. Just mention that, and return the object we want to serialize in JSON. So we tried it out. Perfect. So now let's try to making a simple login system to learn how post routes work. So first create home.html. So we'll go here to our templates folder. Home.html. If we look at this home.html file, we're saying hello to the person if there is a name in our model, right? This should look pretty familiar at this point. If there is no name specified, we're going to prompt them to log in. The action is going to be at /login. Keep in mind, we're going to have to create this action in Spring. So this action is going to be at /login. The method is going to be post. The input field is going to be adding in your name. We're going to call a username, and we're going to submit, right? So we basically have just introduced the concept of a home page. So we need to make the home page route. So let's do that. So we have hello Spring controller. So right next to that, we have this guy. So request mapping is /. Remember for the millionth time that is the home page. So we have a method that returns a string. Remember that this string is going to be the name of the template that we return. We're using in this a model and HTTP session. So we're like, hey, current model object, we're going to add the attribute name, and the value we're going to have for that is the attribute username. So if we've never set username until now, this is going to be null. So remember, think back to the template we just created. If that's null, the name isn't going to exist. So the template's going to render the login page instead of saying hello to that person, right? So it's all in one line, right? We needed the model, so we included it in our parameter list. We needed HTTP session, so we do the same thing there. Okay. So just like I just said, let's rerun our code and just confirm that what we suspect is that we. So this gets me every time. If you just hit run without closing the other thing, then it's going to cause a problem because you can't run 2 servers on 1 port. So throws an exception. So we'll refresh. Stop going to person.json, go to the home page. Once I enter your name, and you type in, and it'll be like 404 because we haven't mapped that yet, right? Please note that up until now, when we have posted data, we have explicitly redirected back to another page, the home page normally. But it's not a requirement that you redirect after you post data. Sometimes websites will render a template on the post page. So it's not, you don't always have to redirect. So that's why this says /login, is because the browser made a post request to /login, and that's where we are now from the browser's perspective. And since the login page threw an exception and didn't redirect you, you stay at the /login page. If you hit refresh after you posted, you'll see this confirm form resubmission thing. So you've seen this before, probably when you browse the internet, the confirm form resubmission prompt. This happens when you have just posted data, and it's making sure that you intended to post that data again. Since the nature of post requests is that you send data to a server, they're like, are you sure you want to send this data back? Because it's possible that the data you sent previously was like a payment, right? So it could be that the browser doesn't know how the server processes this post data, so it could be that by refreshing the page and submitting your data again, that you actually would be like making another duplicate payment on whatever you were doing. So it tries to protect you against that by prompting you with this. In this case, we know that we want it, but it still is a 404, right? Let's reorder my tabs so I stop having to like tab through everything. Okay. So we need to add our post request login URL. request mapping to /login. Method is HTTP. Request method.post. So login reuses the session, and it also uses a string username, which is the data that was passed in through the post. And we're going to do session.setAttribute username, and we're going to give it the username that was passed in. Now check this out. Before, when I said that when you return a string, Spring is going to look for a template with that name. That's true, but you can pass in, or if you can return also strings like this that actually commands the string, the Spring will execute. So in this case, since it sees that there's a redirect colon here, it's not going to look up the template. It's going to redirect you to that URL, that path, right? So it's going to do the same thing we did in Spark by setting your session variable and redirecting you back to the home page. Right? So there's a little bit of magic going on here, because if I hadn't said that, you wouldn't have known. There's no way to be like, if you're like asking yourself, how do I redirect? Unless you know that there's like a magic way to return a string with a certain format, you wouldn't know. Right? So that's a little strange. And that's actually something you kind of have to get accustomed to, and it's where your experience will come into play, right? So once we log in, we're going to redirect to our home page. I'm going to rerun my web server here. So now, when we go to our home page, boot it up, let's say Ben, and hit login, it says, hello, Ben. So this home page got from session the current username. That session variable is no longer invalid. So it rendered the mustache area that was like, hello, username, and then it rendered my username. Right? Perfect. Okay. So one last thing I want to show you. And hopefully this works how I intend. We'll see. This is the danger of doing things live. Is that you can actually, just like you can return a person here, you can return a person here, right? You can accept a person in your attributes. It's like you're not required to just say, string name, city, and integer age. You could say person P. So let's rerun our web server and confirm this works. Hold on to your butts. Oh, you know what? We need a parameterless constructor. I believe that was what went on. So hold on to your butts again. There we go. So what's going on there?
Pulling the object.
Yeah, it's injecting person into the methods. Yeah. Yeah, well, what we updated was the method signature, right? Before we had explicitly said this field name equals, or this pass in this field name, and that made a lot of sense because it was like a one-to-one mapping between like the things we were passing into the page and the parameters that were part of our method, right? In this case, we basically said we have three parameters: name, city, and age, and we're not accepting in our method here name, city, or age anymore. We're still passing those into the query string, but instead of accepting those three parameters, we're accepting a person. So the Spring runtime will know that every person has a field, name, city, and age. It's getting a name, a city, and age from the request. So it's going to build me a new person object and pass in those values into it.
Are you declaring person P right where you have it highlighted? Or, cause like,
No, man, this is we're defining this person method. This is a method. This could be called anything. This could be called pants, right?
right, but where is person P coming from?
The Spring framework. Internally, Spring is going to do a lot of things for you. It's going to receive the request. It's going to parse the inputs, like the request form or the queries string values and stuff like that. And as a part of that process, it's going to call my action here. And so since my action requires a model and it requires a person, it's going to use all the information at its disposal to give me a person object and a model object, and then it's going to call my method. And then my method is going to decide what to do with that data. And what I've decided to do is add that person to my model and then render the person template.
Right, so that's what I'm asking is like, that's a new person.
This is a new person object,
Okay.
yeah, but you didn't have to create it yourself.
Okay.
It's just like, I'm gonna pass to you a person, render the person. And the system's like, okay, I'll do my best to piece together a person from the things that were part of the query string. So it did.
So can you access fields on that person that aren't referenced or aren't put into the method?
Yeah, so like, if we get rid of one of these, for instance, it's gonna be its default value. Oh, yeah. So the reason why that's failing is because Mustache, it sees a name in our person.html. We're rendering a person. It's trying to render the first thing, which is a name. That's null, and it throws an exception here. So, but yeah, it would work if the templating allowed it. If we wanted to have a default value, like we could here, so we could have like for all person objects, we wanted to have like yeah.
And call people from whatever city?
Yeah, let's do this. Say default name city equals default city age is always going to be 0. Yeah. So like if name not null, if city null. So now, if we pass in nothing into this URL, refresh until it boots up, I remove the city, you can see its default city. So the default name from default city is 0 years old, right? When you make a new object, each object is going to have this guy unless you override it with the values you pass in. So that's really how you do optional stuff. Wow, how do I do that with a keyboard? I don't even know what keyboard shortcut I just used. Like name is Ben, and city is Charlotte, and I'm 29, right? Look pretty cool. Cool, dudes. So let's talk about our homework. You might be able to guess what tonight's homework is going to be.
First
Really? Nice. So you guys have opened up the assignment already, I guess. My favorite part about this is how like how unexpected it is. Like that it jets up so much. It's like a Mentos Diet Coke thing. That's physics for you, though. All right. So now on to our assignment. So we're going to make a web application that allows you to write and delete short messages. When you click submit, it will refresh and show a list of messages you wrote. So this is basically the same as the microblog, right? Same assignment. Except instead of using with Spark, we're using with Spring. So we're going to follow the exact same steps that we followed in class to build various set of pages, including username, login, and stuff like that. And then basically, it's the same exact thing as before. All right? Good? So you have until Tuesday to do that, by the way. So that sounds about right. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. That was a really weird hand signal that you just gave me. So I'm going to go ahead and make the repository. New repository that's Spring microblog. Building microblogging with Spring. So we're going to initialize it with the README. I'm going to edit the README by clicking this, and clicking that. And then clicking OK. So take this. We're going to fork that. Thank you, Mike, for pointing that out. So by getting started, you're going to first step fork this guy, and your end result is going to be a pull request here. What's up with my GIF screenshot? Oh, man. They limit the size of the GIFs you can include on GitHub. So sorry, if you want to enjoy the GIF, you'll have to do it on TO and not on GitHub. So, microblogging, adding and deleting messages, just like before, having a simple login page, just like before. So you can use the same exact logic from your previous microblogging assignment. Just we're replacing that Spark with Spring, and you can include that, just like take that information and take the information from today, the lesson from today, and between the two of those things, you should have your end product. Cool? Excellent. All right, Adoring fans. See you when I get home.